Eric,
and William.
And this is Draw the Russian Revolution. The question you're probably asking yourself is, what exactly is the Russian Revolution? Well, the Russian Revolution of 1917 was a sequence of rebellions against the provisional government, fueled by the notion that they were not suitable for power. It began on March 8, 1917 and ended on January 6, 1918. While only lasting for about a year, the revolution had monumental political influences on a global scale. It continued to spread their influence for decades, even after its end. Before we cover our essential ideas, here are a few definitions to help you follow along.
here's our first definition: socialism. Socialism is an economic system where the government is in control of production, distribution, and exchange. The goal of socialism was to distribute wealth equally among all members of society, have the government control it, and have public ownership of public land. Our key figures in this revolution are Lenin and Tsar Nicholas II. Vladimir Lenin was a Russian socialist who was unhappy with the current state of Russia. He wanted to spark a revolution to overthrow the provisional government and give him and his supporters, the Bolsheviks, the power over Russia. Lenin's ideas were inspired by Karl Marx's Marxist ideas. In this revolution, Lenin was seen as the leader of the people. Tsar Nicholas II was the Russian Tsar who ruled until he was overthrown during the February Revolution. Before he was dethroned, Tsar Nicholas II possessed most of the authority to control Russia's economic, political, and social activity.
The Bolsheviks are another important figure. They were a revolutionary socialist political party founded by Lenin after he split with the Menshevik faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. Like Lenin, their leader, they advocated for a socialist government. The Menshevik Party, or the party that the Bolsheviks split from. Unlike the Bolsheviks who wanted the government to be completely socialist, they wanted to work with the bourgeois to create a liberal and capitalist government.
The Provisional Government was the organization that took over power after Tsar Nicholas II abdicated his throne. It was led by the representatives of the government, called the Dumas. The Provisional Government was also unfavorable like Tsar Nicholas II, and was detested by the people, which eventually led to it being overthrown.
Now that we have a basic idea over the figures and ideas present in Russia of 1917, let us talk about the causes that contributed to the beginning of the revolution. There are a few causes that can be given as an explanation for the uprising. 1. The provisional government was not able to hold up the people's requests and did little to improve the lives of the people. For example, the government continued to wage World War I, a very unpopular decision during that time. The people wanted a government for the people, and the provisional government failed to meet those standards. 2. The war led Russia to fall in a nationwide financial crisis, which led to production to slow down. Russia was not gaining any profits from the war and was losing money at a rapid rate instead. This resulted in staple foods like bread becoming a short supply for the middle class. 3. The people were desperate to stop soldiers from World War I and make peace due to the detrimental effects it had on the country. The soldiers also had grudges against the government for forcing them to fight in a war. The parties who led the revolts were the commoners and the Bolsheviks led by Lenin. The commoners were mainly composed of peasants, soldiers, and the people of the middle class. Both parties were unsatisfied with their status quo and wanted change. The commoners wanted new reforms that benefited them as well at the end of the war. The Bolsheviks wanted to create a world where the proletariats, the working class in simpler words, would take power over the country. With this claim, the Bolsheviks joined hands with the common people to revolt against the provisional government.
It was not easy for Lenin and the Bolsheviks to revolt against the government, especially with high police security and under the guarding eyes of the government. In fact, Lenin, the leader of the Bolsheviks, was arrested and jailed multiple times, and at one point he was even exiled to Siberia. In order for the Bolsheviks to overthrow the government, they first had to gather a party of civilians who would join in their cause. Bigger numbers would grant their party more power and take the power away from the provisional government. One way Lenin recruited others was by giving speeches in St. Petersburg. In his speeches, he talked about the detrimental effects of the war and uses the power of the revolutionary spirit inside the people. He promised that by overthrowing the government, they could put an end to the unfavorable war the people so hated.
Another way was through his Revolutionary Socialist newspaper. This newspaper was manufactured abroad in foreign countries and shipped to Russia. It was then distributed by underground groups in the country and given to the common people. The newspaper he created helped spread socialist ideas in secret and helped gather new members. It was on the night of October 25th that marked the end and overthrowing of the provisional government, the storming of the Winter Palace. The Bolsheviks launched a non-violent coup d'etat on the Winter Palace, where they broke inside and captured the Dumas, the representatives of the government. After doing so, the Bolsheviks announced themselves that the new government with Lenin on top as their leader.
Lenin's government in some aspects was a huge improvement from the previous provisional gov. He took power from the wealthy and gave it to the poorer members of society, reducing the inequality that had previously been present in the provisional gov. He also created the All-Russian Constituent Assembly in January 1918, which were councils democratically elected by the people to help run the country. They were similar to the Duma, but instead of being composed by landowners, intellectuals, and the bourgeois, they were led by soldiers, peasants, and workers. Lenin gave the people more authority to help shape their own government, power that had been limited before.
Despite Lenin calling Russia the freest country in the world, some of his reforms went against this statement entirely. For example, one of his first decisions after taking power was to limit free speech. He censored and banned works that were against the Bolsheviks as a way to keep hold of power. In addition, in the late 1917, he introduced the Cheka, the Soviet secret police, who would be tasked to eliminate counter-revolutionaries. These people would go on to kill around 10,000 Russians, spreading fear amongst the Russian population. We could even call it similar to the Great Terror during the French Revolution. While the provisional government had its flaws, they did not implement censorship or have a police created to control the rebellious. The similarities and differences between Lenin's government and the provisional one make Lenin's government both improved and degraded.
Just as how Lenin's new government had its flaws, there were a number of consequences followed, both immediate and long-term as a result of the revolution. One example of an immediate consequence was that it led to a start of a civil war. After the Bolsheviks took over power, there were some who deeply resented the new authorities. This animosity eventually led a war to spark in Russia, one between the Red Army, the authorities, and the White Army, the rebels. The Red Army won, establishing the Soviet Union soon after. On the other hand, an example of a long-term consequence is the unity of Russia as a whole. After the Civil War was brought to an end with the victory of the Red Army, the Bolsheviks continued to gain power. In ways, the war between the Bolsheviks and the anti-Bolsheviks helped Russia bond as a whole, allowing Lenin to possess even greater power than before. This bond was what enabled him to rule the Soviet Union until his very demise.
Finally, another large, long-term consequence was the spread of communism. As a result of the Bolsheviks taking over the government, Russia would be a communist country for a long period of time. Russia's communism would also influence the world around it, leading to the Cold War as tension grew with the United States. If not for the revolution, there is a chance that communist nations today, like China, wouldn't have been communist at all.
This marks the end of our analysis. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.